Good morning, everybody. Welcome to today's knowledge session. In the first series, we understood how little we know or understand about menstrual cycles, right? So today we are going to understand the biological, physiological, and biochemical changes part of the menstrual cycle itself, right? So in the first webinar, we understood how we constantly think nothing is impacting us, right? Because nobody gives awareness towards it. And my realization over the years of working with people is that forget about the situation, forget about the event, forget about how we deal with it. Every thought that comes into my mind is impacting my life. I will repeat this because this is very, very important. Every thought that comes in my mind is impacting my life, right? So, do you think our menstrual cycle is not impacted by what is happening in my life? Can we all relate here? So, we might think that, oh my God, no, this I have dealt with, or this I know how to do with, right? So, we might all be analyzing it that way. But the power of our mind is so intense that every thought that I'm thinking or I'm processing, I'm believing in is impacting me. When it is impacting me, it is also impacting my menstrual health. So that's the level of depth, that's the level of awareness we are all meant to carry. However, forget about the thought. We are not even aware of that how to manage our menstruation, right? See, currently, do you see how many PCOS, PCODs, problem with conceiving, and so much medication, so many painful periods, right? Isn't the percentage of women going through these difficulties is more these days than our own experiences, right? So why? Because they're constantly going through a stressed environment. There's a lot of hormonal imbalance. There is lack of nutrition. So when I say nutrition, overeating is also a malnutrition. Can we all relate? We feel that okay, there's a malnutrition means people are not getting sufficient food. No. Current scenario is that people are overeating. That gives no time and space and energy for the body to process and absorb the nutrition. Can we all agree? Yeah, because overeating is not happening for the healthy food, right? It is all unhealthy. Then what happens? The quantity that they are eating is huge, but the nutrition amount that they get is very little. And we cannot rule out the stress here, people, right? Half of the time you're complaining about the job that you are in, other half of the time you're complaining about the traffic you're in. Can we all relate here? Yeah. And if you have any time left, then you'll also complain about the family or a life that you're living in. Can we all relate here? Yeah. So then, how do you expect to have a healthy menstrual health? Can we all relate here? Yeah. So I think with that in mind, we will start understanding what is menstruation itself. So here is the question we are going to answer today, right? What is menstruation? I think in the last session we had a wonderful sharing and understanding about what in each one of us perceive menstruation is, right? I mean, maybe the thoughts are slightly different now because of our awareness, understanding, and knowledge, and exposure to new culture or different people, different belief system. However, by large and by in large, we all have had the same idea about what is menstruation, right? So today we are going to go in detail. Okay, menstruation is the monthly shedding of lining of your uterus. Okay, I'm also going to show the slide, so you're going to get somewhere closer to the doctors themselves to understand what is all this, right? So what is menstruation? Menstruation is a monthly shedding of lining of the uterus. Okay, menstruation is also known by the term menses, menstrual period, menstrual cycle, or period itself. I think we all know this. But then what is lining of the uterus and all, we will get to know. So menstrual blood, which is partly blood and partly tissue from the inside of our uterus, okay, flows from the uterus through the cervix and out of the body through your vagina. Okay, let me show you the slide of the uterus itself so that you will have a better understanding of what I have been explaining. So can you all see the slide? Okay. So this is a female reproductive system where you have an uterus here, right? So this is where we have uterus, the green part which I'm circling it, right? So now you have a lining which lines the uterus for the embryo. Embryo is your egg, right? So egg comes from us, sperm comes from male. Okay, so when all of that sperm and egg get combined, then it becomes an embryo. Okay, and this is going to stick to the uterus lining, so then it will transform into a newborn baby. Okay, over a period of 9 months. So we're not getting into that part. So now we are going to understand what really happens during the menstruation is every month we release an egg. So how does the egg release happens? It gets released from the ovaries. See, we have two ovaries, right? So we're all born with specific number of eggs in us. So how we all carry the blueprint of our ancestor is when I am in the womb of my mom, okay, I am born with certain number of eggs in my ovaries. Is it amazing? Yeah. So that is how we cannot ignore the impact of blueprint, quality of eggs that we carry. So that is why mother's health is very, very important for you to have a good, healthy quality of mental life as well, mental health, right? Because if the mom's quality of life is not that good, great, I am born carrying the eggs which are equally upset, right? So we all are carrying our blueprints from the ancestors. Okay, I understand, I'm taking you deep. Just listen it as you're hearing a story for now. Okay, once you start experiencing it, then you'll be able to have a better understanding. Okay, so now ovaries release eggs monthly, right? So from the ovary the egg gets carried in the fallopian tube. Can you all see the green mark where I have marked? So this is where the fallopian tube. From there egg comes and settles down on the uterus lining. Okay, and when you don't conceive, that is, your egg doesn't have a sperm to mature it to become a embryo, then what happens, this uterus lining gets to be disposed, right? So this needs to remove and prepare itself for the next pregnancy, right? Is it all making sense? Yeah, I know. So you just understand why we all get periods, because we are, we are the what do you say, nurturer and creator of the new life, right? Women. Okay. And current scenario, we all have this, surgeries or contraceptive pills or whatever method you use to not conceive. However, you are born to create the life here. So you are going to be going through the process for a certain window period where you will be healthy enough to nurture a life. Okay. After a certain time, we start losing this menstrual cycle because we are no longer fertile. Right. So here what really happens is when the uterus embryo doesn't happen, then the uterus lining sheds from the uterus and then comes through the cervix. So that is where you are also going to use your menstrual cups and all that. Then it will enter through your vagina and then come out of your body. So that is where the bleeding happens. Okay, I mean, that part you all know. So every month you experience it, right? So there is a uterine fundus, there is a uterus, and then ovarian ligament, and then there is a fimbriae which helps the egg to move through the from the ovaries to the fallopian tube. Okay, so you can have problem in any of these structures, which will also impact your chances of fertility, right? So now you have a lining which will shed every month, and that is disposed, you know empty through your system through the vagina. Is that clear so far, whatever I have been explaining? Okay, there is, and then there's a, this is also called endometrium. This uterus lining is also called endometrium. When the thickness of this endometrium enhances, then also you will have a painful period and there is a trouble in conceiving. Okay, so whenever you have a thicker endometrium, then what happens? You will have a painful periods. Can you all relate? And whenever there are cysts in your ovaries or cysts in your uterus itself, then also you will have painful periods. Is this clear? So just imagine this is a cycle that needs to happen in each one of our body every month. So now when this has to happen, there are a lot of chemicals, that is called hormones, that get involved in this whole process of menstrual cycle, right? So just remember this picture. You can also take the screenshot if you need, so that I'll continue to explain more in detail about the whole reproductive system. Is that okay with everybody? Yeah, good. So now we will move on to understanding how the process happens. I think I pretty much explained it to you. Still, looking through the words really help us to process better, right? So now, so when the menstrual blood, which is partly blood and partly tissue from the inside of the uterus, that is endometrium, flows from the uterus, it flows from the uterus through the cervix and out of the vagina. Right? Is it clear? See, now one question I want to ask. If anybody can answer. So blood is supposed to clot, right? Yeah? Blood is meant to clot. Right? But then why the clotting doesn't happen in this menstrual blood? Anybody has ever thought of it? Because if we have a cut, if we have a wound, if you have an injury, then the clotting happens, I would say, spontaneous in a couple of minutes to seconds, right? So now why, when we are wearing pads, when we are also using menstrual cups, there's never going to be a clotting? Any idea? Anybody wants to answer it? Have you ever got curious? Okay, I will keep that question open. So understand it. Okay, explore on that. Okay, so menstruation is driven by hormones. Very, very important. You have to understand how a system has to work in our body, right? When a system or a process has to work, then we all need a good balance of hormones. So whenever there is a hormonal imbalance, the first thing that is going to impact is your menstrual cycle. Have you all seen this? Yeah, experienced it, right? So we all have, pimples on the face, or dryness, bloating, headache. Yeah, so you name it, all those problems kick in, right? Hormones are chemical messengers in your body. Okay, so they carry, because see, this whole process is a chemical cocktail, but then these hormones carry those chemicals to the right place at the right time, as needed, in the sufficient quantity, with a good quality of, I mean, right quality and quantity, I would put it in a simple form, right? So hormones are our messengers. In the absence of messengers, what really happens is the chemical transportation doesn't happen at the right time, in the right quantity required. Is it all making sense? Yeah. So how hormones are directly impacting our menstruation cycle. Are we good to move ahead? Yeah. So now, why it is very important to understand the hormones is because your pituitary gland, which is in your brain, I think we have all seen the pituitary gland, right? So where it is placed in the center of your brain, and your ovaries, part of your reproductive system, which I showed in the slide, make and release certain hormones at certain time during your menstrual cycle. See, this is how amazing our body is. And this is why we all know little about our body, because see, here the trigger happens at the pituitary gland, which is in our brain, but the effect happens in our uterus, which is at the bottom of our body. Okay, so that is how magnanimous is our human system itself. Okay, so now what happens? This pituitary gland triggers certain chemicals, which also releases certain hormones in our ovaries, that is on both sides of our reproductive system. Then they release certain hormones at a specific time. That is also equally important. You can just, you're releasing, so you can't release through the month, right? Because we have a beginning, we have a, a thinning down, then we have a, no menstruation, then we again have the next cycle. Isn't it amazing how magical is our body itself, right? So we just need to take care of what we put in and how we process our thoughts, because I was also talking about how your mind impacts your menstrual cycle. So now you understand why your thought process impact your menstruation cycle, is because the master of all our body hormone system is pituitary gland itself, right? If this master gland is not working with the efficiency, then we can have difficulties in all our body systems, because that controls the, has the key to the hormones. And when the hormones efficiency is affected, then the chemical that needs to reach the place is not sufficiently reached, right? It's just like, you have a distributor who distributes the, you know uh, goods to different networking, right? So now the consumer gets it only when there's a good distributor, right? So when there is a difficulty in the transportation tribunaries to the branches, then also what happens, the customer suffers. So all these organs in our bodies are like our customers. Can we all relate here? So now, if one cooks well in the house on time, then what happens? Everybody in the family gets a food on the right time. Now what happens? The one who cooks is not on time, then everybody else is in the family getting affected. Can we all relate? Yeah. So now, do you now the children will suffer with malnutrition or junk eating because they are not getting the healthy food on time. Their health gets affected. So now these children are like our organs who are all suffering because the pituitary gland is not managed well. So why is pituitary gland not managing well? Because our thought process are not right, our belief system is not good, our diet is not happening on time, our exercises are not happening on time, nutrition is ignored, or we are not having a disciplined lifestyle. Can you all relate? So now, when we hear there's a hormonal imbalance, it is not one thing that has damaged or created that hormonal imbalance. It is lot of things that have played a role in an outcome which is damaging your organs or your body system itself. Is it clear? Is it clear? So I'll also go little more. I'll touch these hormones because it's a huge chemical cocktail by itself. However, I will make you more familiar with the names of hormones and how it impacts. Okay. So now we saw this. Is it all making sense? Is this picture making sense now? Yeah. So we all have been carrying this system for how many decades, I don't know. However, we are all ignorant about it. You know, when we knew also, we knew bits and pieces. Now, holistically knowing everything, connecting all the dots only gives us a better awareness and great benefit can be achieved. Are we all with us so far? Yeah? Are we good to move forward? Yeah. So now this is what I wanted to show you actually how it looks in our system. These are the ovary, fallopian tubes. These are the areas. Then there's an endometrium, then myometrium. If you have cysts in the myometrium, also it is very painful. And then you have a cervix, where you have the passage of the blood flow. Then you have a uterus where there's a lining which gets created and then disposed through vagina. Are you all with me so far? Yeah? Good? Yes. So now these hormones cause the lining of the uterus to thicken. When there's a hormone release happens from the ovaries and the uterus, what happens? These cause the lining of the uterus to thicken. Okay? This happens so that if a pregnancy would occur, an egg can implant into your uterine lining. Hormones also cause your ovaries to release an egg that is called ovulation. Okay, so what happens when these hormones release? The thickening of uterus happens so that your body is, your uterus is capable enough to conceive, right? That is a future plan. Like if you conceive, then your uterus needs to be capable enough to support that embryo. Okay, so when this thickening happens, there's also a hormone released in ovaries. Okay, how it releases? It will help you bring out an egg into the uterus. So then what happens? The sperm gets, if the sperm gets at the right time, at the right moment, then what happens? There is a embryo that gets formed. Are you all with me so far? Right? Yeah. So why the whole process happens is to tell you that you are fertile enough so you can conceive and give birth to a new life. Good? Yeah. So now the egg moves down your fallopian tubes where it waits for the sperm. Okay, in the fallopian tube, those two tubes you saw, there it waits for the sperm. If a sperm doesn't fertilize that egg, pregnancy doesn't occur. Okay, so we are not conceiving every month, right? But we all have our menstrual cycle every month. Okay, see, pregnancy doesn't happen, the lining of the uterus breaks down and sheds. That is your period. Okay, so whenever the thickening of that membrane doesn't conceive because of the, you know, because it gets in contact with the sperm and then has the pregnancy, then what happens? That lining which is thickened in preparation, in anticipation of pregnancy, starts shedding down. Then you have your periods. Is the understanding clear so far? Yeah, I'm explaining slowly because not everybody is from the medical background. I understand. Right? So now is it in a better simple understanding for each one of you? Yeah? Is it good? Are we good to move forward? Yes, thank you. So now this is the cross section of your uterus. How many of you feel that men can hold a lot more urine than women? They can hold their you know peeing longer, but we can't, right? How many of you also experience when you have conceived a baby, you want to go to washroom frequently, right? So this picture explains that. See, your uterus is right above the urinary bladder. Okay, so your urinary bladder has a load of your uterus. Okay, the space also smaller compared to men, so your bladder is also smaller. So then what happens, you frequently want to urinate, especially when you have a you have conceived and you have a baby at around in the third trimester. Then what happens, there's a lot more pressure on your urinary bladder. Okay, so then what happens, you want to keep peeing. Okay, so now this is how your uterus is related in the cross section. Okay, so this is your urinary bladder under the uterus. Okay, then this is your rectum, where your excretory system gets operated, right? All your feces will come and accumulate here, then it moves out of the system through anus. Okay, so now you have your vagina, through which your menstruation happens. Okay, so it is this vaginary canal is in between your pelvic system as well as urinary bladder. Okay, so you have something called urethra, from where we pee. Okay, so there are two openings in the vagina. That is, one is where your urethra is, and there is one called vagina. Okay, and there's also one more opening behind in our system, that is anus. So from there we have our stools coming out. So this is where you will have your bleeding coming out, and this is where you will have your urine coming out. Is it clear? So this is the coccyx bone, that is our tailbone, which is in a rudimentary state because of our evolution. Okay, so this is the pelvic floor muscle. So we need to have good strength in this pelvic floor muscle so that we can support the whole of these system. As we grow older, what really happens is that because of lack of engagement, our pelvic floor muscle starts losing its strength. Then what happens, you will have a prolapse of uterus. So your uterus will come out of this vagina, and then it will be hanging here. Then you are more prone to infection. So you will also have poor control of urinary bladder. Then what happens, this urethra will have leaking. I know I'm explaining too much, but then I'm trying to connect these dots because it makes more sense, right? So we all, I think every day in our workout we practice, at least once in a week we practice strengthening our pelvic floor muscle, right? So that helps and supports you to hold a good support system for all these organs. Is it clear so far? Yeah. Can you all relate your own body well now? Yeah. Good. So now what happens? There are 4 phases of menstrual cycle, people. These are very important if you are planning to conceive. Okay. So, but then today I'm going to talk in terms of understanding the chemical, hormonal changes that happen in your system when you're going through these 4 phases of menstrual cycle. Are you all with me so far? Yeah. So I'm going to show you a picture first so you will have a better understanding of what I'm explaining. Yeah, I think. Okay, good to go. Is it all making sense or is it going too deep? Good, thank you. So there are four phases of menstrual cycle. So we'll understand what are these four phases in the first. Okay, first thing is menstruation. When you have your bleeding, that is your menstruation. Okay, so before that, what happens? There is a follicular phase. Okay, so I'll explain each one of them as we move forward. So then there is a ovulation phase. Then there is a luteal phase. Okay, so these are the four phases we have to complete to call it a menstruation, right? If there is any variation or imbalance in any of these phases, then we will not be completing the menstrual cycle. That is when we have so many issues related to menstruation, and this will also lead to conceiving. Can you all relate? Yeah. So now, what are these four phases and what really happens during these four phases? Are we good to go? Yeah. Thank you. So can you also see here? See, this is the menstruation phase. What happens during the menstruation phase? There is a endometrium shedding happens. That is when I have my periods. Okay, so when I have my periods, there's a endometrium shedding that happens. So then what happens? There's a follicular phase. So it is a cycle, right? See, all these four cycles are constantly repeated again and again. So you cannot say which is the first phase, but then you can say, okay, there's a shedding happens, then there's a follicular phase. Here what happens? There is a follicular formed in the ovaries. Can you see here? There's a follicle that is formed inside the ovaries, okay, which is ready to move on through the follicular tube. Okay, so you can see in the ovulation phase, your egg is entered the follicular tube and it is waiting for the sperm to enter the uterus. Okay, so in the whole process, there is a thickening of the endometrium also starts happening. Okay, that is because of the ovulation period. Okay, so now when your ovulation period is happening, there is a more thickening of the endometrium that happens. So then what happens? There is a luteal phase. Here what happens? Egg gets released into the uterus because there is no sperm that has entered the system, uterus, right? Through the uh, uterus. There's no sperm entered. So what happens? The egg starts getting released into the uterus itself. Are you all here with me? Okay. So then what happens? This is called luteal phase. Once the egg releases into the uterus, then what happens? The shedding has to happen because it has not become an embryo. There's no actual conception that has happened. Then what happens? The egg has to release and then move out of the system. Are you all with me so far? Okay. So these are the four phases of the menstruation. We keep repeating them in our every cycle. Okay, what really happens? You have a endometrial shedding, then there is a egg release happens, then there is a ovulation that it moves to a follicular tube. From the follicular tube, if there is no conception or a pregnancy, then it will move into the luteal phase, that is into the uterus, then it start shedding itself. Are you all with me? Yeah, good. So now we will also understand what are the four phases and how this happens. Okay? Are you all with me so far? So I think rather than explaining in deep, I will just show you the picture which will explain it in a better way. Can you all see the picture? Yeah. So here what happens in the x-axis is where your four phases are happening. Okay, y-axis is where you have your follicular phase and luteal phase. So you can see in the first day 1 to day 6 there is a hormone shedding that happens, right, in your pregnancy. For the first 4 to 6 days or 8 days depending on different individual, there is a blood shedding that happens. So during that period you can also see the ovarian cycle, that is your egg is formed, right? So it starts forming from the shedding phase, and then what happens at the sixth day or eighth day, you will have your menstruation stopped, right? So then what happens, there is a proliferative phase. So that is when the bleeding has stopped, but then your egg is growing, right? It is entering into the fallopian tube and then waiting for the sperm to have meet. So now what happens at the 14th day, you have an egg release that happens. So at this point of time, it has to meet with the sperm to have a pregnancy. Okay, so that's when you follow the calendar of your menstrual cycle, so that if you are more keen on conceiving, then you go through this, track your ovulation period, where there's a high possibility of conceiving or having a pregnancy. Okay, so now what happens at the 14th day, then you will have it might vary depending on how long is your menstrual cycle. It is very different for each one of us, right? So based on that, we will calculate the ovulation period and then you conceive. After that, what happens, there is a secretory phase. Secretory phases, there is a lot of hormones which gets released and prepares your uterus for the conception in the anticipation of pregnancy, right? When that doesn't happen, then this egg starts shedding away, right? So then you come back to the same cycle of menstruation. Okay, so here I want you all to also focus on the hormonal variation that you can see in the picture. So this is where the hormonal changes happen. So in the beginning, what happens? There's a purple line, that is a estrogen level, right? So that is at the peak before your ovulation. Okay, so LH is a luteal hormone that is at the peak, that is the purple color. Okay, so when you are going through a ovulation period. Okay, so now when there's a PSH hormone, which is also at its peak when you're in the ovulation period, right? So the minute your progesterone level increases, okay, the minute your progesterone level increases, hormone level, then what happens? You are already in the process of shedding. That is the green color hormone, right? Can you all see green color line there? Okay, so this is the progesterone hormone. So now there are many more hormones that are part of this menstruation cycle. However, these are the four major hormones. Okay, see how their wave is going up and coming down. So any difference or any variation in the quality and quantity of these hormones will impact your menstrual cycle. Is that good? Yeah. So here, when the egg ruptures and egg release happens, your body should be ready to conceive. If that doesn't happen, then it will start moving into a shedding phase, right? So then the cell starts shrinking and losing its ability to conceive. Are you all good so far? So the follicular phase is where before the ovulation, whatever happens is called follicular phase. After the follicular phases, after the ovulation, it is called luteal phase. Is that good enough? So are we understanding why hormones are so much more important. So having a good balanced hormonal level is the necessary for our menstrual cycle. Whenever there is a imbalance in our hormonal level, what happens? This whole system gets disturbed. So the first thing you see is you will miss your periods, okay, or there is a irregularity, or there is a painful cycle, right, or there is a longer shedding, longer bleeding period, right. So why all of this is impacted? Because this part is not maintained well. Okay, so if you're not realizing this, that my menstruation cycles are impacted, so I need to work on myself, you will continue to create more damage to your system, because this is the first one that is getting impacted. Now you're not realizing or being aware that, oh, there's something that I need to focus on. The damages are going to be much more bigger, right. So now we also understood how pituitary gland plays a role in releasing all these hormones, right. So now taking care of our mind is equally important to have a proper healthy menstrual cycle, because that is our master gland and that controls all the systems of our body. Are you all good? Yeah. Is it making more sense now how the menstrual cycle is a bigger thing by itself, right? So now during the menstrual phases, what really happens is that in the follicular phase, when day one of your period until ovulation, it is the follicular phase, estrogen and follicle stimulating hormone, that is FSH, is rising, and it is about 10 to 22 days. Okay. Ovulation, when 24 hours starting when the egg is released. Okay. Only at the time of the egg release, we will go through ovulation period. Okay. There is a 24 hours of window period for that. Okay. So there is a LH hormone and estrogen surge happens. So these two hormones are at the peak when we are going through a ovulation period. Then there is a luteal phase. Here, what happens? Following the ovulation until your period, there is a luteal phase. That's how we categorize. I think you saw all of that in your in the previous picture. Okay. So here, what happens? Corpus luteum produces estrogen and progesterone hormones are all both released, and it is about 9 to 16 days. Are you all good so far? Yeah. Fantastic. So here is what I want each one of us to relate here is that, so it's important to get familiar with your cycles, including when you get your periods, how long they last, and be alert for any changes and report to the healthcare professionals. See, the drive home point here is what is very, very important is keep watching your own menstrual cycle. Maintain a menstrual calendar, which will give you more, you know, awareness about, is there any changes in your bleeding period, or is your menstrual periods having painful experiences? Do you have cramps? Do you have back pain? Do you have headache? Or is there any change in the color of your blood flow also? Are there too many clots in your blood flow? Or do you have, exertion feeling during that? Are you fainting? Right? Are you feeling blacked out? So all these are the changes that keep happening in our menstrual cycle. So keep watching them. And if there is any change, slightest change, seek help, because that is how we will be able to identify and benefit by avoiding much more damage to our system itself, because everything is related to brain here, right? So, and our mind is every cell in our body, right? So now you can't ignore your mind. because it is the superpower. Yeah. So managing your thoughts, your belief system, and understanding and having an awareness to your thought process is equally important, so that we have a healthy menstrual cycle. Okay. So I think that's the drive home point for today's session. So we will also know about what are the myths of menstruation and how we have to be dealing with it in our next session. So I think, is it all making sense now? How deep is the science behind it? I think this is something that we learn in the medical school. And, you know, because there is no connection of dots, we just look at it as an isolated system. Because we think, you know, women or, female reproductive system is isolated and then understood. But then, because there is a connectivity to our pituitary gland, and there is little known about, little spoken about the power of mind and how it can impact each one of our system, we're all left ignorant. We are only treating that specific organ or a system, right? So I repeat this, our mind is there in every cell of our body, right? So now controls are in everywhere, away from the organs. So then that is where the impact is huge, and the damages are also equally high, because uh, after we conceive and then go through a tubectomy or avoid any form of a pregnancy, then our body perceives it as an useless activity, people, because it takes resource, it takes energy, it takes effort for the body to maintain it. The poor nutrition and, unhealthy system is going to hit the periods first. So that is why being mindful of your menstrual cycle is going to help you avoid further damage into your system in the long run. Is that good to go? Yeah. I think we will start sharing, opening the forum for everybody else to share your takeaway or any questions for that matter. Go ahead, Sujata. Thank you.
Yes, it is the complete session is wow moment for me. And I can relate that the mind is connected with that periods. 2 3 months ago, I my periods get delayed by 1 week, and I told you that my periods are getting delayed. I was so worried what happened. And then you told me that maybe the deficiency because of deficiency. Then I started taking those tablets, and now it is on time. And I can tell you for 6 7 years before, the periods were starting on 28th day. Means I was getting the periods, but the bleeding was not started. It was like three third or fourth, then later though it started at fourth or fifth day. So I was getting like irritated in my mind. I don't know what was happening at that time, but after doing the yoga and those sadhana and pranayam and everything, then it controlled. But still, I was having back pain, lower back pain. But now for 3 4 months, I am observing that I am not having back pain during the menstruation. So I can relate that taking care of your mind is equally important. Yes, that is the takeaway from this session. Thank you so much, Rashmi. It is really nice session. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sujata. Big round of applause to you. So, nutrition plays a huge role. Okay. And very little is discussed about nutrition at all, right? So, with the age, I think most of us have a regular, good quality periods till the late 30s or early 30s. Okay. Depending on how good you have taken care of your nutrition part. But then once you are, at the late 30s, what really happens is, your body system starts, you know, letting you make the choices, because it is there to take care of you for 30 years. After that, how you manage yourself, That is how your system works. So if you have taken care well of your nutrition, your practices, and your thought process, and how you manage your physical body, all of that impacts the moving forward. Because after 30 we are all not going to be a great quality egg donors, right? Because of course, this is again what do you say, debatable, because different people believe different things. However, the quality of your egg also start depreciating. And to maintain the quality and the good quantity of your menstruation, you have to pitch in and take the responsibility. Otherwise what happens, people start losing it. So now I hear, I remember in my you know uh, parents generation, they would have periods 50 years, right? The next generation started complaining of not having periods at 40. So now the current generation I hear are not having regular periods even at 20, 30. Of course, it is different for different individual. However, everything is creating that, and it is impacting your reproductive system as well. Nothing is spared basically. However, we are just focusing today on reproductive system, so I'm connecting all these dots just to the reproductive system. Good. Thank you, Sujata. Thank you. Yes, Mitaji, go ahead.
Yeah. Now, my periods didn't create much of an issue as such in the physical aspect, but then because of the infertility issues, I realized that only then I realized that the endometriosis thickness and then some cyst were there. But then when it was explained or told to me, I didn't have any connection or why it is happening. It is happening, so it is. And the doctor, we are all dependent on their knowledge also, no. So he says that this is the way thing, this is the thing, you have to do this, you have to do a laparoscopy. So many times the laparoscopy also was done without any explanation, so I went through all that and then only I conceived. And but then now I realize that how important is the mind. Of course, I was not that period of time or any time for that matter till now. Mind was never an important issue to be worked on, and we never thought it could be worked on also. So the complete ignorance, the ignorance was so large. Now I feel that we didn't know anything about us. We were been just living with a body and completely ignorant of what we have been carrying for so many years. So I totally understand what because of that hormonal impact would have been happening continuously, and how much of a responsibility lies in our hands if we had known. And in it is there only in our hands. Otherwise, it's on medicines. So mind work is so important, and I'm really amazed at the fact that we didn't know that we could work on the mind itself, so when I had a panic attack, that is when the mind became a separate entity of understanding, Otherwise, it was nothing. I feel it that way. So even I feel it that way was never questioned. It was a very natural flow of feeling and acting, feeling and acting, that it was completely one entity, of course it's a one entity, but we never realized that working on ourselves was never a subject, never a thought process, never a idea, never a knowledge heard anywhere. So ignorance is very, very, dangerous in a way. And of course, exposure to these kind of information is very important. I am understanding my past only when classes like this has been taken, because we know bits and pieces, but putting everything together, oh, this is what had happened. It's very important to release some of my issues also from the past. This really helped me to understand what I went through, so I didn't go through it uh, because of my ignorance. So I really understand that. Thank you so much for connecting it, or you always connect it for me. Thank you.
Fantastic, Smitaji. I think, I mean, I love the way, you honestly expressed yourself, because it's not really easy to, acknowledge what we have gone through, right? And, I can completely agree, because see, I mean, huge credit for the medical system, which is trying to do its best. However, the success rate is poor because of the, disconnect between our whole system. Rather than, see, I think the whole purpose of holistic happy use to connect everything, rather than treating everything, isolated, saying, nah, your gut is gut, your mind is mind, your, reproduction is reproduction, and your heart is different. No, everything has to come in sync to make you feel healthy and happy, right? If those connections are not happening, that networking is not happening, you will have bulbs everywhere, but then there's none of the bulbs will light up, because the connection is not established. So our organs are like this, light bulbs, but then the energy has to be supplied from our mind itself, because it is existing in every cell that you are having in your body. And these organs are also a part of, is a bunch of cells of different types, right? And then when you said this, I can completely relate to it. The only, purpose of this holistic happy you is that what I didn't know as a medical doctor, as a doctor myself, I wanted to pass it on to every commoner, so that they can ask the right question, right? They can have a good quality of service, and they can find the suitable doctor who can relate all of this to them, right? Not treating you like, I don't care what you are worrying about, but I'm going to give you a pregnancy. That will never happen, because they might end up injecting more hormones so that you conceive, but then it will have its own repercussions. I'm sure, those who have gone through that infertility journey will be able to relate to it, how painful the whole process is. And the more worry that I have, will I conceive, the more damage you're creating to your own uterus, and the more struggle we all have to go through to conceive. That magnanimous is the impact of our thoughts on our uterus, people. And it's not just limited to uterus. Huh? Today I'm just saying uterus because our focus is that. Okay, just imagine how each of our system is taking an energy, which not knowingly I am only poisoning myself, and then everything else is taking the brunt. Thank you for that. Yeah, you want to add something, Smitaji, here? No, good. Thank you for that. Yeah, yes, Maulia, please go ahead.
Thank you for the session, and it was very knowledgeable. I learned about reproductive system in my second PUC. I knew a little bit of that, but you said so much things, especially that pelvic floor muscle is so important to us, and you told about all those things. That was very like it was like bulb on moment like that I felt. And even I had so many questions that I would see ladies telling that, my auntie is telling that I have a continuous bleeding. And so some people also, they were operated in the reproductive areas. And I was feeling that why ladies are, after some age, after marriage and all, why these people are getting these problems? Is there no solution for that and all? And I didn't know that mind is also, it is so important. And another question is that some ladies are after a period of time, they will lose this menstruation cycle. At that time, they will be very sensitive. So, how we should handle as youngsters? What's the solution? Like my mom is going through this. It's not completely what her menstruation cycle is going on for 2 months, 3 months, like this it is. So, what is the solution?
Okay, I think good question, Maulya. And see, that is called menopausal age, right? So it's a premenopausal. We also go through different stages of menopause, right? You know, you're just on and off with your periods. So then you will become more cranky, basically, right? Because you saw the chemical cocktail that happens in our system, right? So here nutrition plays a huge role, and how you're managing your body and mind also plays a huge role. Okay, so here support system is something that can help you. Okay, not necessarily that everybody has to go through menopausal, what do you say, hormonal uh, complications. Because if you have a healthy lifestyle, healthy routine, and you have managed your other hormonal balance, you will go through this phase normally. Okay, so that's why having a healthy routine, having a some form of an exercise for your body will get you manage your emotions well. Then what happens, all the other hormonal variation can be managed well. And of course, right amount of nutrition, and right support system when you're going through all those experiences, and how your thought process works is also equally important. So it is, all in all, it is a collective work. There's no one pinpoint solution, pop a pill and then the solution happens. No, there's nothing like that, I suggest. However, we can also give a hormonal replacement during that, which is also available in the form of tablets or patches, which also has its own consequences. Depending on the severity of the person, we will make a decision on that. However, working on your body, mind, and soul will also help you bring in a better quality of life for you. I mean, for whoever is going through, because we all have to go through that phase at one point or the other, right? Yeah. Did that answer your question, Molia?
Yeah, and you told that after 30, uh, there will depletion, and I got afraid because I am 30. So, I'm not married, and I feel afraid when you tell like that.
No. See, I'm 45 and I have, I still have a normal cycle. Okay. So it is not a thing to be worried about. It is a, you know, it's a it's a thing, thought process that we have to align ourselves, that I have to start taking care of my health now. I think it's a word of caution rather than scaring people here, right? So and till 30, we take our body, mind, everything for granted, like we just flow with life. Yeah, can we all relate here? Because we have all other priorities in life, which feels like, oh my god, I have to do this, or I have to, I mean, we have different goals at that point of time. But then by 30, you know, all this hormonal kick starts settling down. Okay. So we are more calmer individual, because your chemical cocktail has come to a certain balance. So that is when your priorities, your thought process, everything, it gets lot more clearer than what you are in your 20s. Okay, so then is the time that we also have to start taking responsibility for managing this hormonal balance, because all these days our pituitary glands and all the other systems have been managing itself. You're not really contributing in any way, right? You've just taken it for granted. So now you have to jump into action and then start taking your wellness, right? Physical, mental, emotional, and social well being to your responsibility, and start doing actions on that. Not just thinking will not help, action is also equally important. Knowing is not good enough if I'm not taking any action towards it. I think that is where it's a word of caution rather than scaring anybody here. Right? Good that you are at the right spot at the right time. You got the right knowledge. So now it's up to you how you take the action moving forward. Okay? That's a good thing. Thank you. Thank you, Mole, for that. So, did that answer your question, Mole? Yeah? Good. Thank you. Yeah.
Well, one thing is, you said about the nutrition that we have to be aware of. Will that be said in the next class?
Yes. So, we have something called coffee cutting where we answer all your questions, and also there is a more, deeper discussion that happens. So, that will happen every Tuesday from 4 to 5:30. You will get the link, you can join in there. Then I'll address all your questions in a much more deeper level. So this is only a knowledge sharing session. We'll take in what was your wow moment. That is what you said, no, bulb on moment. So that is our wow moment. So we discuss here. Question and answer will be answered there completely. Okay, in a longer window period. Thank you. Thank you. So Suchi ma'am, you're there? Okay. Gayatri ma'am?
Good morning, everyone. I'm sorry I came in late. The knowledge is important at whatever age. It's, I think, more than 25 years since I had my menopause. So, but whatever it is, it's good to know many things. The only thing that I knew more or less about the menstrual cycle, how it happens, all that. But the connection between your thought process, your hormonal imbalance. I knew it is hormonal imbalance because when I had my menopause, I had severe pigmentation. Like my face had become almost black. So it was quite severe and it lasted for a few years. And now it has cleared after so many years. So I wish doctors for the skin at that time, I had been to at least 2-3 dermatologists, but nobody mentioned anything about the thought process, how your mind can affect this thing. Fortunately, during my periods, other than very heavy bleeding for 8 days, I didn't have any other problem. So that period and passed peacefully, and even menopause, sort of I was prepared for that, I think. So I didn't have any, I had heard many people saying that people get cranky, they become very sensitive, all that. I said, what the hell, if it stops, I'll be very happy. So to be very honest, I was extremely happy when my period stopped. And to this day, I hold the whole same opinion. So it wasn't very painful mentally also, but I wish people, particularly in the medical field, educate young girls and women about all these, joining the dots. How good nutrition and your thought process can take care of all these factors. That I think is extremely, extremely important. I wish more and more medical professionals and even people like yoga teachers and others, whoever can, and parents can educate their children. Of course, when parents educate, it doesn't have much impact on the children, particularly now because youngsters have more access to internet information. So the nutrition part of it and the role played by mind, that has to be explained to all the young girls right from very young age, I feel. The one more thought that came to my mind was, since mind plays such a big role, could that be a major cause of our children with disabilities? That I'm wondering. I know it impacts, but could it impact to such an extent? Maybe can we prevent the disabilities in one of the ways, could it be the possible ways? I'm just thinking. On the whole, though I joined at the right time when you started the presentation. So wonderful session, Rashmi. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Gayatri ma'am. Big round of applause to you. Thank you for sharing all those valuable inputs. I would, being from the medical background, studying everything, all our system for the last, 25 years, there is never a word spoken about mind itself. So in our academic system, there is no nutrition, there is no, mind, there is no psychology that is brought into our practice or into our academic system. So at least now, I think in MBBS they have psychology. We are not trained to address the mind. To tell you honestly, I can relate how people demand so much from a medical doctors, but then how little they are trained to do it. So I stand with them because being a doctor, knowing all this, how the chemical impacts, how our body behaves during a menstrual cycle, and I couldn't help myself. I think that is the only reason why this holistic happy you is come out, because I had to do a lot of self learning before I connect these dots. And it didn't happen in a day or a two. It took many years of my work and my engagement with a lot of people to understand connecting the dots. And I'm sure it would be a beautiful word when everybody is trained to value and understand the mind itself, right? So I'm glad that you're all part of this, we're all part of this together. At least we can help the upcoming generation to the next level, right? Where we can guide them and we can reach out to at least one person. I'm sure each one of you are reaching more, adding more zeros to that one in your own way, and bringing out that quality, menstrual health to women, especially because I think we are responsible. Each one of us are responsible, owning that responsibility, because each one of us go through those cycles, whether you know it, whether you know the connect, whether you don't know the connect, you are going to be bearing it, right? So I think it's we each one of us can be that torch bearers to help someone who is ignorant. I think that is where it's a bigger responsibility for each one of us to move forward. Thank you, Gayatri madam. I think it's rather than demanding, it is we being owning that responsibility and contributing in whatever way each one of us can do. I think that is where word can be a better place. Thank you. Yes, Suchi ma'am, please go ahead.
It's so amazing to see the connect between the mind and the body, right? And everybody, doctors also talk about hormonal imbalance, but that's the only terminology that we hear. There's nothing to say what is the hormonal imbalance. There's nothing to tell us how do you balance it. And they only talk about healthy lifestyle and things like that. But I think even doctors need to really be able to connect and say those kind of things, because there are different phases of your life that you would have gone through periods quite comfortably without any aches or pains, or you've gone through a very cramps and all of those kind of things. But there are phases where you come out of it, okay, and some things would have worked for you. Like I remember I started doing something of acupressure and doing it regularly. Then I think my periods sort of like pressing all the different palms, points, pressure points on your palms, and it really helped me. But when I look at it and see whether does it help my daughter, it doesn't help my daughter, because literally because of her fibromyalgia, and I have literally given her massages on her hands every day, and including, because I know the uterus points, including her wrist and everything, but that doesn't seem to help her much at all. So when you look at, and I hear that there's so much the mind plays, even she herself being a paramedical and having understood all these medical aspects of it, yes, she does understand that there's a mind is something which plays and all that. But I think definitely if there's much more of education about how do you manage your or how do you balance the hormonal imbalances? Not just use that word and leave it, but some kind of first thing that would say, okay, if you do this consistently, at least give people tips of how you do that, and you'll start observing results. I think people would probably be more really, you know, motivated to try that, and they will definitely have a better quality of life. So I think that's something which I think would have helped, where we don't have to go through getting a hysterectomy done at 40 or 41 and things like that, right? I think my hysterectomy was done when I was 41. Okay, so my sister went through it at 43, and I think my younger sister's a little more older, but I think I was the youngest in the family to go through a hysterectomy. So yes, my life also has been stressful. So how do you manage that? How do you balance the hormonal imbalance? I think that's something which is very important, that we should be able to tell that to our kids and youngsters around us, so that if we sort of help them to connect the dots, if we connect the dots and help them to think of connecting their own dots, I think we get a better quality of life for them. Because how do you do that? It's easier said than done, but I think that's really critical to do that. Because I think no matter what age or whatever generation one belongs to, everybody's hated periods and said, Abba, who wants to go through this every month, kind of a thing. There are times that it hasn't bothered one, but there are times like, Abba, psych, Abba, it's done, you don't have to do. And what I must say is, though my hysterectomy was done at 41 for whatever hormonal imbalances, and that's being the cause for it to go, but it's still, my body still went through the menopausal thing, went through the lots of hormonal imbalances. Of course, I did not take any medication to handle the hormonal imbalances, but I think the emotional um, uh, part of it was definitely there. And even for that, there was not much of a thing, Ananta. How do you deal with those balances? And another was not there. So anyway, I'm glad we've got lots of youngsters here who can have a better quality of life, and we can do a little bit to improve their quality of life. And when they go through these phases, at least we would be able to put in a different perspective, or the right perspective. At least we can share and do things like that, which I think will be a good thing. So how much the mind plays, how do you deal with hormonal imbalances? I think that's something very critical, which I think every woman and man should be made to understand and be aware of it, for actually a good, better quality of life of mankind, I would say. It's
Thank you, Suchi ma'am. Big round of applause to you. Thank you. I think we all can relate to what you put in. Yes, that's why this menstruation is a series of knowledge session, because it cannot be put in one slide and told, we are done. No, I want to bring in all my wisdom, all my learnings, all my connection of dots, and connect it to our room, because we are the creator. And as Gayatri madam said, why disability happens, because how your mind as a creator is impacting your womb is also little known, right? We might expect, yeah, it should resolve, but then we also know very little about mind. However, whatever knowledge we have, are we even putting into action, is where my concern is. That's the whole purpose of Holistic Happy You, where we bring the knowledge and also help you to go through the experience of the transition by transforming your knowledge into an action. I think that is where the huge success is seen in each one of us, in whatever way we have done. So thank you so much. You want to add something, Sushma ma'am?
I just wanted to say, when we're talking about knowledge, I think I want to say my conversations with people has now become to talk about knowledge. That it is knowledge is not powerful until we put it into use, because there are lots of knowledge that we have not put into use. I think this is something which is coming up in lots of my conversations. Like it's now, it just flows that I do make this statement saying that just knowing is not sufficient unless we put it into use, and we will not see it powerful. So all of us have knowledge. So I'm just smiling for that. And I thought that's a part of my conversation with people for whatever, any aspect of life that we talk about, whether I'm talking to parents or to anybody about health or any of those things, and motivating. I've been talking to people. There are lots of people who want to join this workout. So let's see. I think we'll get a few more people, and I think drawing inspiration when they meet me at Gayatri. I think the minute Jayashree saw me, she said, I had a bad catch and I thought of you, Suchi, because I had told her 4th of November, you should be back at the session. First, take care of your health. Afterwards, you do whatever else you want to do. Don't give me all that nonsense at the hell. So I'm sure we'll start having more people coming in. And
I think it's a need of the hour, it's a need of the hour for all of us to, engage, you know, translate our knowledge into action. And that doesn't happen when we are all by ourselves. We all need a community, we all need a support system, we all need handholding. I think that's the true beauty of this holistic happy you itself, because we are not just learning, we are also bringing that into action in our own way. And and there's a huge success that each one of us have experienced only because of that. So thank you everybody. My gratitude to each one of you for giving me this wonderful opportunity to bring all my life experiences into a platter and then serve you all. I'm glad that I got this opportunity. Otherwise, I would still keep processing, and then going to the next level and then let go the all the new learning, right? So thank you everybody. Have a blessed day. See you all on Monday. Take care. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for the lovely session.